Bank manager throws black CEO's mother's ID on the floor. $3 billion deal ends immediately. Victoria Sterling, the 73-year-old mother of billionaire CEO Marcus Sterling, enters First National Bank expecting the routine courtesy that any customer deserves, unaware that her simple transaction will expose institutional prejudices that threaten her son's $3 billion business partnership. The retired school principal who shaped one of America's most successful entrepreneurs carries herself with quiet dignity earned through decades of fighting for respect in spaces that didn't always welcome her presence. When branch manager Robert Whitman's discriminatory treatment escalates to throwing her identification documents on the marble floor, he unleashes consequences that will ripple through corporate boardrooms and reshape how institutions think about customer service, human dignity, and the true cost of prejudice. Sometimes the most expensive lessons come from the cheapest moments, when character reveals itself under pressure and institutions discover that respect cannot be rationed without destroying relationships that took years to build. Victoria Sterling sits in the back seat of her modest Honda Civic, her son's billion-dollar empire feeling impossibly distant as she prepares to enter First National Bank to handle what should be a simple transaction. At 73, the retired school principal carries herself with the quiet dignity that comes from 4 decades of shaping young minds and fighting for educational equity in underserved communities. Her worn but carefully maintained purse contains identification documents that most bank employees would process without a second thought. But Victoria has learned through 7 decades of life that respect isn't automatically granted based on age or character. Sometimes it must be demanded, sometimes it must be fought for, and sometimes it simply isn't available at all. The woman who raised Marcus Sterling, now CEO of Sterling Dynamics with a net worth of $4.2 billion, has never forgotten that her son's success doesn't shield her from the casual indignities that society still inflicts on people who look like her, especially when they don't arrive in luxury vehicles or designer clothes. Marcus Sterling built his technology empire on a foundation of principles his mother instilled during their years in a 2-bedroom apartment. When Victoria worked multiple jobs to keep him in school, while fighting administrators who tried to limit his potential based on zip code assumptions. His artificial intelligence platforms now power Fortune 500 companies across 6 continents, generating revenues that dwarf the GDP of small nations. But every business decision reflects lessons learned at his mother's kitchen table about treating people with dignity regardless of their circumstances. The irony that Victoria must still navigate a world that judges her by appearances rather than character isn't lost on Marcus. His wealth has opened doors for him that remain closed to the woman who made his success possible. Sterling Dynamics operates under strict policies about customer service and human dignity, values that Victoria taught him during childhood conversations about how to succeed without losing your soul or forgetting where you came from. The relationship between Marcus and First National Bank spans 3 years of increasingly lucrative business dealings, with Sterling Dynamics maintaining corporate accounts worth hundreds of millions while the bank provides financing for international expansion projects that have made both institutions extraordinarily profitable. Today's meeting was supposed to finalize a $3 billion infrastructure deal that would cement First National's position as Sterling Dynamics' primary financial partner for the next decade, a relationship that bank executives have courted with lavish presentations and promises of white-glove service. Marcus has built his reputation on meticulous attention to every detail of his business relationships, understanding that how institutions treat his family members reveals their true character more accurately than any corporate marketing campaign. His mother's simple errand to update her personal banking information has become an unexpected test of First National's commitment to the values they've claimed to share with Sterling Dynamics. Victoria enters First National Bank with the confidence that comes from knowing her son's business relationship with the institution should ensure respectful treatment, but also with the wariness that comes from decades of navigating spaces where her presence is tolerated rather than welcomed. The marble floors and mahogany fixtures speak of old money and established power, the kind of institutional wealth that has historically excluded people who look like her from both employment and service. She approaches the customer service desk with the same calm professionalism she brought to parent-teacher conferences with wealthy families who questioned her authority, her demeanor reflecting both the expectation of courteous treatment and the preparation for disappointment that experience has taught her to maintain. The woman who shaped one of America's most successful entrepreneurs has learned that respect must sometimes be earned anew in every interaction, regardless of what she's already accomplished or whom she's raised. Branch manager Robert Whitman notices Victoria approaching his desk with the practiced eye of someone who spent 15 years categorizing customers based on appearance, economic status, and his own unconscious biases about who deserves attention in spaces like First National Bank. At 48, Whitman has built his career on managing relationships with wealthy clients while efficiently processing routine transactions for ordinary customers. His success measured by his ability to prioritize profitable accounts over time-consuming service requests from people who don't significantly impact the bank's bottom line. Victoria's modest dress, lack of expensive accessories, and quiet demeanor trigger assumptions that place her in the category of customers he handles quickly and dismissively, without considering that appearances can deceive or that character might transcend economic circumstances. His approach to customer service operates on a sliding scale of courtesy that correlates directly with perceived wealth, a system that has served his career well in an industry that rewards relationship management with high-net-worth individuals over universal respect for human dignity. When Victoria presents her identification to update her personal information, Whitman's impatience is immediately apparent. His tone carries the barely concealed irritation of someone who views her request as an interruption to more important responsibilities. He examines her documents with exaggerated scrutiny, questioning details that would receive routine acceptance if presented by customers whose appearance suggested greater financial significance. Victoria responds to his condescension with the patience she developed during decades of dealing with difficult parents and uncooperative administrators, her calm professionalism masking growing awareness that this interaction reflects deeper problems than simple customer service inefficiency. She explains her request clearly and politely, providing all necessary documentation while maintaining the dignity that has defined her approach to navigating institutional prejudice throughout her adult life. The conversation escalates when Whitman suggests that Victoria's business might be better handled at a different branch, his words carefully chosen to avoid explicit discrimination while clearly communicating his desire to remove her from his responsibility. His dismissive attitude transforms routine banking procedures into obstacles, creating unnecessary complications for transactions that should require minimal time and effort. Victoria recognizes the tactics from her teaching career, the subtle ways institutions create barriers for people they'd prefer not to serve, the bureaucratic maze that tests patience and persistence while providing plausible cover for prejudicial treatment. Her responses become more pointed as Whitman's behavior becomes more obviously discriminatory, her voice carrying the authority of someone who's fought similar battles before and won't be easily dismissed or intimidated. What Whitman doesn't realize is that his treatment of Victoria Sterling is being observed by other customers and staff members who recognize that something significant is happening, that the routine rudeness directed toward an elderly Black woman might have consequences extending far beyond customer satisfaction surveys. The bank's marble-lined lobby becomes a stage for a confrontation that will test institutional values against individual prejudice, corporate policies against personal biases. Victoria's calm persistence in the face of Whitman's increasingly obvious discrimination creates tension that ripples through the branch, making everyone aware that they're witnessing something that will either be resolved professionally or escalate into something much more serious. The woman who taught her son that character reveals itself under pressure is about to demonstrate that lesson in a setting where the stakes are higher than either she or Whitman fully understand. The confrontation reaches its breaking point when Victoria calmly but firmly challenges Whitman's unnecessary delays and discriminatory treatment, her voice carrying the authority of someone who spent 40 years commanding respect in difficult situations. "Young man," she says with the tone that once silenced disruptive board meetings, "I've provided all required documentation and answered your questions. I expect the same courteous service that any customer receives in this establishment." Her words cut through the pretense that has allowed Whitman to mask his prejudice behind procedural concerns, forcing him to confront the reality that his behavior has been observed and found wanting. The elderly woman who raised a billionaire refuses to accept treatment that diminishes her dignity, her stance reflecting decades of fighting for respect in institutions that preferred her silence to her strength. Whitman's response reveals the full extent of his character. Rather than acknowledging his inappropriate behavior or adjusting his approach, he allows his frustration and prejudice to override his professional judgment completely. In a moment that will define the rest of his career, he takes Victoria's identification documents and deliberately throws them on the floor, his action crossing the line from poor customer service into outright humiliation. "If you don't like how we do business here," he says with barely contained rage, "you can take your paperwork and find somewhere else to bank." The sound of Victoria's ID hitting the marble floor echoes through the suddenly silent lobby like a gunshot, every witness understanding that they've just observed something that transcends poor service to become something much more serious and consequential. Victoria stares at her scattered documents with the composure that comes from facing worse treatment and surviving. But her silence carries more weight than any angry response could achieve. She slowly bends to collect her identification, her movements deliberate and dignified while every person in the bank watches with growing awareness that they've witnessed something unforgivable. The woman who taught her son that actions have consequences rises to her feet with the quiet authority of someone who's dealt with bigger bullies than Robert Whitman, her expression revealing nothing of the phone call she's about to make or the storm that's about to engulf First National Bank. Her dignity in the face of deliberate humiliation transforms her from a victim into a force of nature, her calm collection of the scattered papers serving as prelude to consequences that will reshape the institution that allowed such treatment to occur. As Victoria walks toward the exit with measured steps, the lobby remains frozen in stunned silence, everyone understanding that they've witnessed something that will have repercussions extending far beyond customer service complaints or personnel reviews. Whitman's moment of prejudicial rage has created ripples that will spread through corporate hierarchies and executive boardrooms, testing institutional commitments to diversity and respect while revealing the gap between stated values and actual behavior. The elderly black woman who entered seeking simple service leaves with evidence of institutional failure that will force First National Bank to confront uncomfortable truths about its culture and values. Her scattered identification documents have become symbols of a much larger problem, while her dignified response has set in motion events that will either transform the institution or destroy lucrative relationships that took years to build. Victoria sits in her car outside First National Bank, her hands steady as she dials her son's private number, her voice calm but carrying undertones that Marcus immediately recognizes from childhood, the tone that preceded serious conversations about respect, dignity, and the consequences of crossing lines that should never be crossed. The conversation that follows is brief but comprehensive, Victoria's precise recounting of events at the bank delivered with the clarity that comes from decades of reporting incidents to administrators and board members who needed to understand exactly what had occurred and why it mattered. Marcus listens without interruption, his mother's words painting a picture that makes his business relationship with First National Bank not just uncomfortable but impossible to continue, regardless of the financial implications. The billionaire who built his empire on principles learned at his mother's kitchen table faces a moment that will test whether success has changed his values or strengthened his commitment to them. Marcus's response is immediate and decisive. Within 30 minutes of his mother's call, he's contacted his legal team, his chief financial officer, and the investment bankers handling the $3 billion infrastructure deal with First National Bank. The conference call that follows is tense but focused, with Marcus explaining that the bank's treatment of his mother has made continued business relationships impossible, regardless of contractual obligations or financial penalties. His executives, trained to prioritize profit margins and market opportunities, initially struggled to understand how a customer service incident could derail years of relationship building and hundreds of millions in potential revenue. Marcus's explanation is patient but absolute. Sterling Dynamics cannot partner with institutions that treat people with disrespect, regardless of the financial cost of maintaining that principle. The company that revolutionized artificial intelligence through ethical frameworks refuses to compromise on human dignity for the sake of business profit. The news of Sterling Dynamics' decision spreads through First National's executive suite like wildfire, transforming what bank leaders assumed was a minor customer service issue into an existential crisis that threatens the institution's most important client relationship. CEO Patricia Morrison finds herself in emergency meetings with senior vice presidents who struggle to understand how Robert Whitman's behavior toward one elderly customer could jeopardize a partnership worth billions in revenue and prestige. The bank's executive team, focused primarily on quarterly earnings and market positioning, discovers that their institutional culture has created vulnerabilities they never anticipated, that customer service failures can have strategic consequences when they involve family members of major clients. Morrison's attempts to reach Marcus directly are deflected by assistants who explain that Sterling Dynamics considers the matter closed, that business relationships require foundation of mutual respect that First National has proven unable to provide. As news of the severed partnership spreads through financial markets, First National stock price begins declining while competitors scramble to position themselves as potential alternatives for Sterling Dynamics' banking needs. The $3 billion infrastructure deal becomes a symbol of how quickly institutional relationships can collapse when foundational values are compromised, with industry analysts struggling to understand how a single customer service incident could destroy years of successful partnership. Marcus's decision to prioritize principle over profit sends ripples through the business community, challenging other executives to consider whether their own institutional relationships align with their stated values. The bank that prided itself on white-glove service for important clients discovers that respect must be universal to be authentic, that dignity cannot be rationed based on appearance or perceived economic status, without creating vulnerabilities that threaten the institution's most valuable relationships. Within 24 hours of Victoria's humiliation, First National Bank faces a crisis that threatens not just the Sterling Dynamics relationship, but the institution's entire reputation and market position. Social media explodes with video footage captured by other customers in the bank lobby, showing Robert Whitman throwing an elderly black woman's identification on the floor while other employees watched without intervention. The viral nature of the incident transforms a single moment of prejudicial behavior into a national conversation about institutional racism, customer service standards, and corporate accountability in America's financial sector. News outlets pick up the story, connecting Victoria's treatment to broader patterns of discrimination that have plagued banking institutions for decades, while civil rights organizations call for comprehensive investigations into First National's policies and practices regarding minority customers. Robert Whitman finds himself at the center of a media firestorm that destroys his career and exposes the toxic culture that allowed his behavior to flourish unchecked. His immediate termination becomes a public relations gesture that fails to address deeper institutional problems, while internal investigations reveal patterns of discriminatory behavior that have been overlooked or minimized by management focused primarily on profitable relationships. The branch manager who thought he could mistreat an elderly woman without consequences becomes a symbol of institutional arrogance that prioritizes appearance over character, profit over principle. His personal downfall becomes secondary to the broader reckoning that First National faces regarding its values, training, and commitment to treating all customers with dignity regardless of their perceived economic status. The financial implications of First National's crisis extend far beyond the lost Sterling Dynamics partnership, as other major clients begin questioning their own relationships with an institution that has demonstrated such clear failures of character and judgment. Pension funds, university endowments, and socially conscious investors initiate reviews of their banking relationships, forcing First National to confront the reality that institutional prejudice has become a business liability that threatens the bank's survival in an increasingly diverse and socially aware marketplace. CEO Patricia Morrison faces board meetings where directors demand explanations for how a single employee's behavior could threaten hundreds of millions in assets under management, while shareholders question whether leadership failures enabled the crisis that's destroying their investment value. Marcus Sterling's decision to publicize his reasons for ending the banking relationship transforms what could have been a quiet business decision into a teaching moment for corporate America about the true cost of institutional discrimination. His public statements about requiring business partners to demonstrate universal respect create pressure on other financial institutions to examine their own policies and training programs, while inspiring executives to consider how their personal values align with their professional relationships. The billionaire who built his empire on artificial intelligence platforms designed to eliminate bias in decision-making extends those principles to his business relationships, proving that success doesn't require compromising on fundamental principles about human dignity and respect. His mother's treatment at First National becomes a catalyst for broader conversations about corporate responsibility and the importance of aligning business practices with stated values about diversity and inclusion. 6 months after Victoria Sterling's humiliation at First National Bank, the institution has undergone radical transformation under new leadership committed to rebuilding its reputation through authentic cultural change rather than cosmetic public relations gestures. CEO Patricia Morrison's resignation leads to the appointment of David Washington, a veteran banking executive whose track record includes successfully reforming institutions with histories of discriminatory practices. The new leadership implements comprehensive training programs that emphasize universal respect and cultural competency, while establishing accountability systems that make customer service excellence a requirement for advancement rather than an optional consideration. First National's transformation becomes a case study in how institutions can address systemic problems through leadership changes, policy reforms, and genuine commitment to treating all customers with dignity regardless of their appearance or perceived economic status. Victoria Sterling's experience catalyzes changes that extend far beyond First National Bank, inspiring federal regulators to examine customer service practices across the financial sector while encouraging civil rights organizations to document patterns of discrimination that have been normalized through institutional indifference. Her dignity in the face of deliberate humiliation becomes a symbol of how individuals can challenge systemic prejudice through courage and principle, while her son's business decision demonstrates how economic power can be leveraged to promote social change. The elderly woman who collected her scattered identification with quiet grace has become an unlikely catalyst for institutional reform, proving that character and integrity can triumph over prejudice when supported by allies with the resources and influence to demand accountability. Marcus Sterling's approach to business relationships evolves to include explicit requirements that partners demonstrate commitment to diversity and inclusion through actions rather than just statements, creating new standards for corporate partnerships that prioritize social responsibility alongside financial performance. Sterling Dynamics establishes the Victoria Sterling Foundation, focusing on educational equity and financial literacy programs that empower communities to navigate institutional systems with confidence and knowledge. The Foundation's work reflects lessons learned from Victoria's banking experience, that systemic change requires both individual courage and institutional accountability, that dignity must be protected through policies and practices that make respect non-negotiable regardless of customer demographics or economic status. The broader impact of Victoria's story extends through corporate boardrooms and business schools across America, where executives and students examine how quickly valuable relationships can be destroyed when institutional culture enables discriminatory behavior. Her experience becomes a powerful reminder that customer service excellence requires universal application, that respect cannot be rationed based on appearance or perceived wealth without creating vulnerabilities that threaten institutional survival. The woman who raised a billionaire on principles of dignity and respect has proven that those values remain relevant in corporate America. That success requires maintaining character under pressure and using influence to protect others who might not have the resources to defend themselves. Her scattered identification documents have become symbols of institutional failure, while her response has created lasting change that protects future customers from similar humiliation and disrespect. 2 years after the incident that cost First National Bank its most lucrative client relationship, Victoria Sterling has become an unlikely spokesperson for customer rights and institutional accountability, her story inspiring legislative proposals that would strengthen protections against discrimination in financial services. The retired school principal who once taught students about civil rights now speaks at corporate conferences about the business case for universal respect, her presence reminding executives that character matters more than quarterly earnings when building sustainable institutional relationships. Her speeches combine personal narrative with practical insights about how institutions can create cultures that serve all customers with dignity, proving that wisdom comes from experience rather than credentials, and that authentic leadership requires the courage to confront uncomfortable truths about organizational culture. Marcus Sterling's business empire continues expanding globally while maintaining the ethical standards that his mother instilled during their years in modest circumstances, proving that principled leadership can coexist with extraordinary financial success. Sterling Dynamics has become a model for how technology companies can use their influence to promote social change, with AI platforms designed to eliminate bias in hiring, lending, and customer service decisions across multiple industries. The company's partnerships require demonstrated commitment to diversity and inclusion, creating ripple effects that influence how institutions approach training, accountability, and customer service excellence. Marcus's decision to prioritize his mother's dignity over a $3 billion deal has become legendary in business circles, inspiring other executives to consider whether their own decisions align with their stated values about respect and human dignity. First National Bank's transformation under new leadership has restored its reputation while creating a model for how institutions can address systemic problems through authentic cultural change rather than superficial reforms. The bank's commitment to universal customer service excellence has attracted new clients who value organizations that demonstrate genuine commitment to treating all people with respect, proving that ethical business practices can enhance rather than limit financial performance. Robert Whitman's career destruction serves as a cautionary tale about how individual prejudice can destroy institutional relationships, while Victoria's grace under pressure exemplifies how dignity and character can triumph over discrimination when supported by allies with the courage to demand accountability. The Victoria Sterling Foundation has distributed millions in educational grants while establishing financial literacy programs that empower underserved communities to navigate banking systems with confidence and knowledge, creating lasting change that extends far beyond the single incident that sparked its creation. The Foundation's work reflects Victoria's belief that education remains the most powerful tool for social change, that knowledge and preparation can help individuals defend their dignity when facing institutional prejudice. Her son's resources combined with her wisdom have created programs that teach young people about their rights while preparing them to succeed in environments that might initially seem unwelcoming. The scattered identification documents that once symbolized institutional failure have been transformed into catalysts for change that protect future generations from similar humiliation while creating pathways to success that honor both individual potential and collective progress.